Hey, good evening, everyone. Happy Wednesday. We're back. We're going to give our top 5 fantasy football PPR running backs this week. We gave the tight ends last week. We're going to shift over to the backfield this week. I have my brother with me again. Hey, good evening, Justin.
Good evening.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into it. We'll do the same thing we did last week. We'll start with the top 5 PPR fantasy football running backs in 2021. At number 1, we had Jonathan Taylor, obviously running away with it, literally. We had number 2, Austin Eckler. Number 3, Najee Harris. Number 4, Joe Mixon. And then number 5, a bit surprising to me, was James Conner. So those were our top 5 in 2021. Let's go ahead and give our predictions for 2022. Just like last week, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, bro. Let's hear your top 5 and a little bit of reasoning behind why you chose these 5 for 2022.
All right, yeah. Coming number 1, I got JT coming number 1 again. The dude's just a touchdown machine. He's running behind one of the better offensive lines in the league. I do believe Matt Ryan's actually going to even open things up to possibly let him have a better season. That's just crazy to think about because he had 20 total touchdowns last year, which is an astronomical amount of touchdowns. He had over 2,100 total yards. The better QB play, I really do think is going to open up things for him to have an even better season. There's no competition for him over there. They got rid of Marlon Mack in free agency. He's off in Houston now. So, it's the JT show over there. I think he's going to produce possibly even it's a real strong possibility that he produces a better season this year than next. Then I'm going to go to Eckler. Early on, in Eckler's career, I wasn't a big fan, but last year, he proved me wrong. I really like Eckler. I like the offense they're in. They have a lot of good weapons to take the pressure off of him being like the stud and everyone, all the defenses putting their focus on containing him. For PPR, obviously you got to be able to catch passes. He catches passes. All these running backs here, they get targets and they catch passes. So Eckler also had 20 total touchdowns last year, just an astronomical amount of touchdowns from the running back position. I do want to take a step back, and JT, he played a full 17 games. Eckler, he played 16 games, so these guys are all relatively healthy. They don't miss a lot of time. On to Najee. I have Najee as my Mixon as my number 3. He actually played 16 games of a bounce back season because the year previously he actually missed 10 games due to injury. So he bounced back in a big way. He stayed healthy, played 16 out of a possible 17 games, and he delivered in the playoffs. He had 16 total touchdowns, and honestly, it was a career year for him. He had the most rushing attempts of his career. That translated into the most yards of his career. Then he had also the most touchdowns of his career. And I think that's a reflection of obviously having Joe Burrow healthy for a whole season, and moving the offense, just constantly moving the offense, getting in a position where he can score touchdowns. And that's going to be huge for him next year. 4th, I have Najee. For me, with Najee, it's not so much an efficiency thing because he wasn't actually very efficient if you think about it. He only scored 10 total touchdowns. He averaged less than 4 yards per carry last year behind a shaky offensive line. For me, it's all about volume. He got over 300 carries last year. He might get a little bit less this year, but when you look at their depth chart, I can't name their backup running back. I can't name their backup running back right now. I couldn't name their backup running back last year. So I think that he is still going to have a lot of carries. He also caught 74 passes last year from the running back position. Again, we're talking about PPR here. He also played 17 games, played a full season. So with the volume, he was able to remain healthy. Coach Tomlin and that staff did a really good job of making sure that he stayed healthy and stayed on the field. And then my final spot here, I was really toggling with this one because I didn't really realize it. I thought for some reason Zeke was just hurt because Pollard shined. It took some of that spotlight off of him. But Zeke actually did finish as the number 7 PPR running back last year. He wasn't very healthy throughout the year, but he didn't miss games as a result of it. So another back here on my list, he played a full 17 games. So health is a big part of why I have these guys all in my top 5 going into the year. And without Amari in the picture, I believe that Zeke does get a few more carries. Going into this year, he had 12 total touchdowns, 237 carries, and 47 receptions. So they're still going to use him to catch passes. He'll probably score more touchdowns this year. And Dallas's offensive line is known to be, pretty good. So those are my top 5 backs. And like I said, at the end of the day, a lot of this boils down to health for me. That's why these guys made my top 5. A longer season. They're playing 18 games now. It's an even bigger factor when it comes to fantasy is, can these guys stay on the field and produce? I don't go with the consensus ADP. Guys like McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook, they're consistently ranked high. And don't get me wrong, their talent is there if they could stay on the field for 16, 17 games. But they haven't proven that in recent years. So that's why I like my list.
Yeah. To be honest, I agree with pretty much everything you said there as far as the reasons why you have these guys in the top 5 and why you don't have some of those other guys in the top 5. Obviously we all know how talented Christian McCaffrey is and what he can do when he's on the football field. But as you mentioned, over the last 2 years, he's missed a ton of time. And we all know that usually what happens to running backs once they get that first injury and then it's followed up by another one is that they're just like a used car at that point. Not to dehumanize these guys, but I mean, if you think about it, that's kind of what they turn into now. Now you got to start repairing other parts, and before you know it, it's time to trade the vehicle in. So I agree with you. Obviously, I would say if, we could forecast the future and say that Christian McCaffrey is going to be healthy for 17 games or 16 games, somewhere in there, I would definitely have him at the top of the list. But the reality is, like you said, his track record over the last couple of years, it is the total opposite of that. And it just leads us to believe that he's probably going to miss significant time again, especially considering Carolina's line is not very good. And you really don't know what you're going to get at quarterback from them, from whoever they decide to start. As far as the guys you do have on your list, I like the list. Obviously, we talked about it. We have a couple different, in a few different spots here, and we have a couple guys flipped. I agree with you as far as Jonathan Taylor benefiting and having possibly a better season with Matt Ryan at quarterback. And I think the biggest reason I feel that way is Matt Ryan is, in my estimation, going to cut down on the turnovers that Indianapolis, gave up last year through the poor decisions that Carson Wentz made, which will give Jonathan Taylor more opportunities to get more yards, more catches, more touchdowns, et cetera. So I agree with you. I think he could definitely have a much better year with Matt Ryan, if you can believe that, because he had a phenomenal year last year. Eckler, like you said, you can't say much. They have weapons all over, so you can't really key in on him in the backfield. But I think he's another guy that could have an even better year. Obviously, we'll talk about it when we get to my numbers or my picks, but I think he could have an even better year than he had last year as well. He's going to benefit from, there's a lot of pass rushers that move to the AFC West, and everyone's expecting this division to kind of cannibalize itself. Yeah. And what I've found is, obviously watching football a long time, one thing that you see a lot when you're playing against teams that have a fast defensive line or fast outside linebackers is a lot of dump offs and screens and misdirection plays to running backs. And I think Eckler being in that division is going to benefit from the fact that they're playing some pretty tough defensive line. So they're going to have to get rid of the ball quick and come up with some draw plays and screens and things of that nature to move the ball. So I think he's going to benefit from the improved defense, believe it or not, as far as the pass rushing goes. I like Mixon. I can't argue with that pick. I agree with you that Najee is on the list, not so much because of efficiency, but definitely volume. And I see that continuing this year. He's really, I mean, if you think about it, they have Freiermuth. We talked about him last week, with the tight ends. They lost Juju. I know they have Claypool. They got a little bit of talent at wide receiver, but I really think that Najee is their go-to guy at this point. Their offense is going to center around him. And I don't think he's as talented as Christian McCaffrey, but I think that you could see him put up those types of numbers because of, like you said, the sheer volume of catches and carries that he's going to get.
And availability.
Yep.
And availability too.
Yeah, availability. He's young, so he's healthy, relatively healthy. Hopefully he remains healthy. Not just because we want him to do well in fantasy, but just because we don't want anybody to get hurt. But hopefully he remains healthy. And then Zeke, he was one of those guys that I went back and forth in my bottom little tier there. I had him in there for a minute. I had a couple other guys in there. I think he could have a breakout year, but I also think that he could lose his job to Tony Pollard by the end of the season.
No.
You never know with Zeke. I think it just depends on what Zeke shows up.
Well, I mean, he hasn't had a bad season in his career.
No, I'm not saying he had a bad season. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that with the way the game is played, we know that passing is it. That's what it's about. It's all about passing. I feel that Tony Pollard gives them more. He's more of a threat in the passing game coming out of the backfield. Obviously, he didn't carry a full workload, and Zeke has established himself as that guy that can be the bell cow. But I really feel, and I'm not saying that Zeke will lose his job. I just say I think that it could go one of two ways. He could have a great season, or it's possible that he could, end up being the number 2 in that backfield because of maybe Tony Pollard breaks out. I mean, he had a great year last year sharing time with Zeke, and who knows what happens as they go along. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that it's a possibility in my mind.
It's really difficult for me to fathom. I mean, Zeke did have 47 catches last year still, even with Pollard. So, I mean, that's not a small number for a running back position. And not especially for a running back who, quote, wasn't, his healthiest. But I do see Pollard having a bigger role with the offense. They don't have Cedric Wilson anymore either. They don't have Amari Cooper. So maybe they use Pollard out of the slot. I just don't see any scenario other than Zeke aging out at the running back position or contract maybe. But Zeke's locked in his contract right now. Isn't he just signed? So I don't see it. But I don't know. He did have some flashes last year. That's hard for me to even come up with a scenario where that would happen. But we could be wrong.
That's why they call it I could be wrong. You got it. But overall, I like your list, and I could see this group finishing in the top 5 in some order. Obviously, I think JT and Eckler are at the top of the list, but I definitely like who you have up here, and I could see them finishing in the top 5 for sure.
And just in case our whole 5 viewers, anyone who's hating on me about putting Eckler or freaking Mixon above CMC and Dalvin, I know. Listen, CMC and Dalvin, they could bounce back. Mixon and Eckler, they both missed due to injury in 2020. They had bounce back years this year. So it could happen with CMC and guys like Dalvin, but I'm not rolling with those guys until they prove it.
Yep, I got to see it first.
That's
I
right.
agree. All right, cool. Let's go ahead. I'm going to give you my top 5, and then you can tell me how right or wrong I am. Again, we got a few names that are the same, just in a different order. So I have Eckler actually finishing number 1. I have JT at number 2. Probably surprising to a lot of people, I have Aaron Jones at number 3. I have Najee at number 4, just like you. And then I know this is a surprise to almost everybody. I have good old Lenny at number 5. So obviously, number 1, number 2, I have them in that space for the same reasons that you have them in those spaces. So, we're not to spend a lot of time on that. They could finish in either order, but I think those are the top 2 fantasy running backs going into this year. And until somebody proves them wrong or somebody outdoes them, then I think they're going to stay there for a little bit. When it comes to Aaron Jones, the reason I have him at number 3 is because of the loss of Davante Adams. And one thing I know about Aaron Rodgers is on the football field, he goes to what he's comfortable with. And what he's comfortable with right now is Aaron Jones. That's about the only thing that he has that he looks around and goes, oh, this is familiar. So I think that that's going to benefit him. They're going to probably be a little more on the run side. I'm not saying they're going to be a run-heavy team, but I think they're going to run the ball more, especially down in the red zone, because they don't have Davante as that red zone threat where you can just throw it up there and he can jump up and out jump everybody and catch it over pretty much any DB in the league. So I think Aaron Jones is going to benefit from that. And then obviously those passes that were going to Davante Adams, they have to be split up and going somewhere. And I think Aaron Jones is going to pick up a good share of those also. And since we're talking about PPR, that's definitely going to propel him up the ladder. So that's why I have him at number 3. Number 4, like we talked about, Najee, I think it's just pure volume. He's basically the center of that offense at this point, especially with the unknown at quarterback. They don't really know, what they're going to get. I know that they have, Trubisky, but we'll see how that plays out. So again, I think he's based on his volume, he's going to be a top 5 running back in fantasy pretty much no matter what, unless he gets hurt. And then the other one I know is probably surprising for everyone is Leonard Fournette at number 5. And again, I think for some of the same reasons that I have Aaron Jones up there are the same reasons I have Leonard Fournette in my top 5. Obviously, you have Godwin coming off of an injury. I know he's going to be back and hopefully 100% at some point. But until then, they really just have Mike Evans. They lost Gronk. So, they don't have that same stability at tight end anymore either. And I really think, again, when they get down in the red zone, Tom Brady's going to go to what he can rely on. And when there's no Gronk there, and Mike Evans is getting double teamed in the back of the end zone, and they're pretty much following him everywhere he goes, Leonard Fournette's going to be his next best option in the red zone to pick up some touchdowns. I think, again, he's going to pick up some of those, some of that receivers that. Oh gosh, I'm stuck. Tongue-tied. Some of that workload that Gronk had and that Godwin had until at least Godwin gets back 100%. So, and Leonard Fournette is a very capable receiving running back out of the backfield. So I know when a lot of people think about Leonard Fournette, they think about him just being a big burly running back and running people over. But he's very good out of the backfield, has very good hands, and then when he gets in open space, he's a lot faster and quicker than people realize. So I think that again, he has a good chance as long as he stays healthy, because this is something we talked about before we hopped on. He did miss a couple games last year. Aaron Jones missed a couple games last year, but as long as they can stay healthy, I have full confidence that those two guys could definitely finish in the top 5, along with the other 3 that you had up there in your top 5. So that's my top 5. I'd love to hear your feedback. What do you think? Where am I wrong? Where am I right?
I don't know. I don't really know if you're wrong. Well, of course, we don't won't know until the end of the year. Yeah. But it was a little shocking to see Eckler at number 1 over JT, just given the level of separation that there already was in fantasy points. I mean, I don't know the exact number. I probably should have done my research, but JT outpaced every fantasy running back by some like 75, 100 points. Yeah. I mean, he just blew everyone out of the water. So there's a lot of ground to make up for any running back to overtake Taylor as number 1. But I mean, it could happen. He's got the skills to do it, and he does get utilized in that offense. So, it's possible. I don't disagree with it. It just was a little bit shocking given the distance between, JT and the rest of the field. It's like there's that tier of running backs. You got JT in tier 1, and then everybody else.
No, I agree. As far as last year goes, you obviously can't argue that. I think Taylor, he benefited from a lot of long plays last year. So again, we're talking about fantasy football, so that makes a big difference, especially when you start talking about maybe getting bonuses and things. And again, I think he could have a phenomenal year this year, as we talked about. Quarterback play should be much better, give him more opportunities. But I think that Eckler is still coming into his own. He's still getting better as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan Taylor finished at number 1. I think that because the gap was so big, it's hard for me to see him repeating that and keeping and maintaining that same distance between him and the field. So that's why I went with Eckler, but I would not be shocked at all if Jonathan Taylor finished number one again. I just didn't want to have the same number one pick as you. That's all.
All right. Well, I can appreciate and respect that. Well, let's talk about Jones. This one right here actually really does have me curious. I could see it happening in the sense that Jones has the talent and skills. It reminds me a lot of the Cowboys situation with Zeke and Pollard, because you have Aaron Jones and you have a really good running back in A.J. Dillon, who showed flashes last year. They did use him a good amount, and he played really well. So I guess where I like Zeke a little bit differently than Jones is, now the Packers have, other than Randall Cobb, who's probably should be retiring soon, have no proven weapons. So the defenses can really game plan around the running backs. LaFleur, he is a coach that likes to run the ball. I think early on in their relationship, that was one of the things that him and Rodgers kind of tifled about, was the fact that LaFleur run the ball a little bit more than Rodgers liked. Or, I don't know. I could be wrong about that. But that was all speculation. But we know they're going to run the ball. It's hard for me to see them with the timeshare. It's hard for me to see Aaron Jones really being able to break out when they don't have a number one receiver. They don't have a number one receiver right now. Aaron Jones could be their number one. Maybe he could be a Kamara-like role. Maybe that's how he creeps in the top five, where he catches a lot of passes. But from a talent standpoint, he's definitely a top five back. It's just for fantasy football, I think that the weapons in Green Bay aren't good enough to support him, having an open field and being able really to do a whole lot. I think that the boxes are going to be stacked. He's going to see a lot of stacked boxes. Dylan's going to get some carries. And that one right there, I would be on board with if they had any other not even Devontae Adams, just a number one receiver. Maybe they got Landry and free agency or something before New Orleans did. But they have now a young wide receiver group. They do have Aaron Rodgers, though. So I could be wrong.
So what you just said is, because I thought about those things, and you're absolutely right. They don't have a proven number one. That they don't have a guy that jumps off the page where you're like, oh wow, we got a game plan for him. I get it. However, because they have Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers is that dude, let's just call it what it is. He's if not the most talented quarterback to ever play, he's one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever play.
I agree.
And he does have the ability to make guys better. He doesn't have that track record, as like some of the other guys do. Don't get me wrong, like Alan Lazard, nobody knew who he was before Aaron Rodgers started throwing him passes, right? And I'm not saying that Alan Lazard is going to be a number one wide receiver. What I'm saying though is the reason that I had Aaron Jones up there is I think he's gonna really eat in the red zone. I think he's gonna pick up a good portion of that workload that Devontae Adams left behind. But I also think that Aaron Rodgers is smart enough to know that defenses are going to be stacking the box. And I think LaFleur is smart enough to know that. And I think that they're going to have a game plan each and every week to open the field up and get the defenses to back up. And as long as you got Aaron Rodgers, you've got a chance to do that, because all it takes is a few passes for him to get hot. And next thing you know, they're rolling. So, but at the same time, I agree with you. It could backfire on me, and Aaron Jones could see 8 and 9 man boxes all year long and have one of his most miserable seasons ever. I just feel like because of the void in the red zone that Devontae Adams leaves, I think Aaron Jones, that's where he scoops up those additional fantasy points to get him up there.
And so that's kind of my concern is I don't see them getting the red zone very often.
Well, I think because the division they play in, I think, they're going to, like, the Bears aren't going to be very scary.
Yeah.
Minnesota, and Detroit is Detroit, right? And although Detroit I like their coach, And I like the fact that they fought every single week last year, and he seems to have them going in the right direction. They're still at least 2 years away from being like a really, really competitive, team, I would say, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
I think he's going to benefit from playing in a weaker division. I haven't looked at their entire schedule, but I think they have one of the, I wouldn't say softer schedules, but I would say when it comes to fantasy football, when you look at the defenses that he's going to go against, he's going to have some opportunities. So they may not get to the red zone as much as they're used to, but I still think that they'll get there enough to where Aaron Jones can pick up those extra touchdowns and catches.
I think Aaron Jones, to make the top 5, he's going to have to catch a lot more passes. He's going to have to catch a lot more balls than last year and previous seasons. So if he picks up the slack there, could crack out top 5 easily. It's really, really early. So again, it's just where my thoughts are. I don't disagree with the talent being there. Fournette, I actually like more than Aaron Jones. I toggled with putting Fournette in my top 5 over Zeke. I had who did I have you take out right before this? Swift.
Oh yeah, DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, it all really just boiled down to games played for me with Fournette and Zeke. Those were actually kind of my final 2 that I was breaking it down to. And I took Zeke because the fact that he played 17 games, but I like Fournette in the sense that they no longer have Ronald Jones. Fournette can catch the ball. He showed that last year. He can catch the ball. I was very surprised with the hands he's got. And Tom Brady actually likes throwing the ball to running backs. He's accustomed to that from his time in New England. He's liked throwing the ball to the running backs as soon as he got to Tampa. Unfortunately, they didn't have the same type of backs in Tampa that they had in New England. So it wasn't until last year that Fournette really showcased the hands that he has. And so with that said, it just boiled down to the amount of games. And I think Fournette can get right up in that top 5. He's right there. I would think it'd be easier for him, in my opinion, than Aaron Jones at this point. I like the weapons that Tampa Bay has opposed to Green Bay, especially, with Mike Evans, Tom Brady as the GOAT. And who they bring in? Russell Gage. Godwin should be back at some point. I know they lost Gronkowski, but they do still have talent at the tight end position. They still have Brate. So they've got talent there. I like Fournette. I think that the difference with Fournette and Jones for me is that Fournette's just got a better supporting cast. He's got, I wouldn't say a better quarterback. I mean, overall career, Brady's been better. But at this point in their career, they're both pretty up there in age. I think that they're really similar as far as, production. Styles are a bit different. Rodgers is quite a bit more athletic than Brady. But Fournette has the edge for me. I do really, really like Leonard Fournette going into this year. In fact, I was trying to trade for him in my fantasy league just the other day. Our trades opened up, and, man, I'll be damned. Someone got him before I did.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. I want to go back to something you said. You saying that Tom Brady is not athletic?
Oh, gosh. Don't get me started.
Are you serious? Have you seen the man run?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's why you said it then. All right, cool.
Listen, I'll say this. He plays in the NFL, so he's quite a bit more athletic than I am.
Yep. I would agree with that, but when you compare him to other NFL quarterbacks,
right.
I agree. He's one of the most unathletic quarterbacks that we've ever seen.
Man.
But yeah.
But all right. Hey, listen, I really like Fournette. I think he's going to have a really big year. I'm going to try and draft him. I hope nobody.
Yeah, I think he's going to have a really big year. I could see your point with Aaron Jones. Again, I'm leaning the other way. And I'll give you this, and I'm not saying that he's very talented, but I'm not saying he's Christian McCaffrey. But when you think about those years, a couple years ago when Christian McCaffrey was, killing everybody in fantasy football, he didn't really have the best supporting cast either. Right? I mean, if you think about it, probably the best wide receiver he played with was out of Robbie Anderson. I can't think of another great wide receiver that he's played with. Can't think of a tight. I couldn't name Carolina's tight end for the last 3 or 4 years, probably. So
He didn't have to give carries up either to any other running.
What's that?
He didn't have to give up any of his carries to any of the running backs either. I mean, even the past couple years, they drafted. Oh man, why can't I think of his name?
Mike Davis.
No, they didn't draft Mike Davis. It was shoot. I don't know. I can't think of his name, but I guess that's what I'm getting at is they even drafted a running back. Everyone thought he was gonna wind up stealing carries from CMC, and that even never came to fruition except for when CMC got hurt. So
okay,
he's always had a high volume. If Aaron Jones gets the kind of volume that Christian McCaffrey had in early on in his years, let's say he gets the same kind of volume that Najee has, or even just a little bit less than that. If it's volume based, Aaron Jones has the talent to be a number one fantasy running back.
And that's really what I'm basing it on is volume. I think that he's gonna be just like Najee. He's gonna be that go-to guy in their offense. Even in the passing game, I think he's going to be the go-to guy in their offense. So, he's going to get enough targets and carries that I think that the sheer volume is going to make up for the lack of supporting cast.
I actually don't like Green Bay, so I hope not.
But I hope they go 0-17 every year.
I know, but it could definitely happen. It could definitely happen.
Or it could not. I could be wrong. That's why we do this. So
that's why we do this.
Yep, that's right. So that's our top 5. We would love to hear you guys' comments. Maybe put your own top 5 in the comments.
In the CMC and Dalvin Cook crap. I want to hear it.
And then we can tell you guys how wrong you are.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, enjoy this content. Be on the lookout for more content coming in the near future. Next week, we will give our top 5 wide receivers, which should be another fun debate. In the meantime, again, be kind, everyone, even to Cowboys fans, and we will talk to you guys next week.